Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to thank you for checking out my video. This is a quick tip video on singing in tune. I am going to go very quickly through quite a number of thoughts for you. There's going to be work involved. Let's just be forthright about that, shall we? These are the ideas around what may be causing you to have intonation problems. You're going to have to try to observe them in your singing and then ask yourself the question of how to go about fixing it. Here, we're going to talk about how you can fix it, but you're going to have to observe what's happening. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. If you haven't yet, I hope that you'll choose to do so now. First and foremost, I'd like to differentiate between intermittent and systemic intonation problems. If you have a systemic intonation problem, i.e., every time I get to the high note, I'm flat, well, that is a reflection of your technique and the balance of musculature in your vocal apparatus as it relates to the subglottic air pressure. In English, your support's not right. In other words, there's too much vocal fold engagement, and as such, or there's not enough airflow, there's not enough subglottic air pressure. So the vocal fold is using more muscle than is strictly speaking necessary to get the desired pitch. This happens very frequently on the high note, when you get to that high note in the phrase or in the song, and you'll see it come up from one piece to the next piece to the next piece. And it usually goes something like this. And you can hear I'm coming in nicely under that pitch, right? But if we approach that with a better sense of engagement and more balance, then we will arrive at that note more in tune. So that is a systemic issue if you're seeing it over and over again on the high note in the phrase. How do you deal with that? What do you do? Investigate the amount of vocal fold engagement you are using. Investigate your apagio breath management. If you don't know what apagio breath management is, now would be a great time to look into that. That transformed my singing, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is an aspect of bel canto singing, but it is just as appropriate for those of us singing popular styles as well as classical styles. It will do marvelous things for the consistency and the overall responsiveness of your voice. As part of that practice, you will also investigate vowel alignment. This is another aspect of your systemic practice that could be compromising your intonation. You will notice it primarily, like everyone's got like their vowel that they're really great at and then their vowel that they really dread. So for whatever reason, the vowel for me has always been not a big deal. Haven't had a real hard time with that. But oo, no fan of oo on this side of the glass, shall we say. So I always have to make sure I'm practicing it. What you will notice if you have a vowel alignment issue is that the phonation, the sound of your voice, will change dramatically, and oftentimes intonation will also be a part of that change. So for example, if I sang ooh, and the ooh closes everything off and the intonation gets a little bit wobbly, that is a vowel alignment issue. That is more in alignment with the ah vowel. I get a more consistent response from my voice. That is not a systemic problem. Okay? So, systemic, intermittent. What do I mean by intermittent? Intermittent is when you have an intonation problem and it is specific to a situation, or it is specific to a particular passage in a piece of music. Here, context becomes extremely important because you have to identify what it is specifically that is at that moment in that piece of music that is creating the intonation discrepancy. And I might add here that we really want to be specific about this. If it's an E natural above middle C in one song, but an E natural above middle C in a different song is perfectly fine, that's intermittent. If it's I'm singing fine until I get to the E above middle C in this song, and kind of the same thing here in this song, and well, actually, same thing here, that's a systemic problem. That's, speaking for myself, that would be a problem with my balance of subglottic air pressure and vocal fold engagement, airflow and support in my zona de passaggio. But let's say that this is truly an intermittent problem. And I got a bit of a list here. Could it be a large skip? So for example, if you're doing an octave skip, that's a pretty dramatic skip for a vocalist. A lot of the aspects of our phonation is going to change when you go that wide of an interval. You may need to work on that specific interval. Is it a less frequently used interval than you are typically accustomed to singing? So in vocalizations, in our vocal practices, we are very comfortable doing scales and arpeggios. And if you do any of mine, you get this from time to time, and occasionally I throw in a seventh in there as well. Those will be very familiar. But if it's a sixth, or, goodness me, a minor sixth, well, those are a little bit less common. And in those cases, we can sometimes, just because our aural skills, our ear training, is less familiar with those intervals, that can then mean that we're a little bit out of tune. So you'll have to go and practice that specific interval. Less frequently used chord tones. So for example, if you are mostly singing in the popular genres and you're quite happy clipping along in those kind of things, but all of a sudden in your piece, you get that major 7 in the 4 chord and you're not familiar with it, or it's new, or you don't do it very frequently, and you are required to sing it as part of your melody, that may require a little bit of fine-tuning. Going one step further still would be non-chord tones. So if you're here and the first note of your melody is on the second scale degree, singing that without having it be part of what is played. You are the melody. No one's playing the melody for you, and you have to start there. You may need to practice your ear training a little bit to make sure that you are singing that pitch nicely in tune. And I might add that all of this goes even double if they are pitches that are in the zona de passaggio or above your secondo passaggio. If they are out of the speaking range of your voice, the ear training typically is a little bit more challenging. And so that may require still more practice. I might add there is an undercurrent of systemic practice that I'm addressing here, and I'm going to just call it right out, which is solfege. A solfege practice helps with all of these things. So if you get comfortable singing do, re, mi, fa, sol, do, re, mi, fa, sol, you can really help a lot with your intonation. Solfege for me is something that is a very important part of my practice. I use it every single day in what I do, and that hasn't transformed my musical life quite as much as Appoggio did, but it's really close. I had to think about that a little bit. Solfege, I might say this about it though. Appoggio certainly transformed my singing, but solfege and having a solfege practice to work on ear training certainly has had the greatest impact on my overall musicality and the depth of understanding of music that I have, and that I continue to work on and try to grow. So take that for what it's worth. Let's get a little bit finer still. Recording. Is your mix right? Do you have what you need to hear and not too much of it? If you are wearing headphones, which is quite likely in a recording environment, are they too loud? Are they too soft? Is the relationship of your voice to the backing track where it needs to be? Have it be too loud or too soft and you'll get different results. If it's really, really quiet but your voice is really loud, we as vocalists tend to kind of back off too much and we get inconsistent results in our voice. If it's too loud, we tend to sing really hard to try to hear ourselves above it. We will tend to go flat. Our intonation will suffer. This is again one of those intermittent scenarios where in your normal everyday vocalizations where you're just practicing, your intonation is quite good. Here, all of a sudden, it becomes not so good. It is worth mentioning too that performance anxiety can also figure into this, and that is another matter that requires some self-reflection in order to kind of work with and get into the swing of things when you're in the recording session. Usually, if I'm starting to feel that in the studio, and I mostly work in my own studio, so time pressure is not a big issue for me. That being said, I do want to get things done more or less in a timely fashion. I don't want to spend ages and ages doing it. If I'm feeling a bit anxious about it, I'll just let myself run through the track several times rather than trying to obsess over it or try and figure it out. Better to be in the process, and once I'm in the process, I move on quite nicely into getting really nice takes around things. Additionally, you can always try to offset one of the headphones so that you've got one on the ear, or even if you're me, only partially covering that ear and the other one is off entirely. You just need to hear enough of the track so that you can stay in time with it. And that may be enough. Again, this is assuming that your intonation is fine when you're not in the studio. If it's always a problem on that track, then something else is in play and you'll need to assess that. Finally, on stage. Again, the idea of mixes, monitors, in-ear monitoring systems versus wedge monitors, all of the things that we talked about when we were talking about recording come into play here too. So if the wedges are crushingly loud, that can have an impact on you. If only your voice is crushingly loud, that too can have an impact on you as well. If you are in a band and the stage volume is crushingly loud, that will have an impact on how you use your voice. And disciplined as you may be, it is incredibly challenging to try to stay in a frame of mind that allows you to create productive vocalizations, productive singing, when you have a stage volume that is so loud on stage. You hear stories about artists who, when asked how they could hear themselves when singing, they said, well, I couldn't hear myself. I just trusted that I was singing it properly. Unfortunately, that happens more frequently than I'd like to have. Certainly, I've been in that situation more times than I care to think about. It's far from ideal, and it's not really what I want to experience when I'm on stage. That's in part what led me to doing more acoustic stuff and ultimately, kind of doing more recording and things like that instead of live performances. But if you do like playing with a band, try, and it is delightful. Like playing with a live band is fantastic. Try to deal with your stage volume. Try to get into in-ear monitors. Try to get the mix right. And finally, I want to just stress one more time the idea that solfege and ear training is incredibly important to all of this. Being able to predict the pitch before you sing it is more than half the battle. If you have an internal idea of the pitch that you are going to, you have done more than half the work. If you have practiced your vocalizations and you have worked towards well-balanced, productive, sustainable phonation throughout the various registers of your voice, those two things will get you 99% of the way there, and you'll only be dealing with these intermittent annoyances. Lastly, and I probably ought to have mentioned this right up at the front of these things, there are sort of a matter of degrees here with intonation. Generally speaking, if you are within 10 to 13 cents of the desired pitch, we would say that you are on the note, but you are flat or sharp. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's good enough. I'm just saying that that's still in the ballpark, shall we say. If you're greater than that in one direction or another, then it may be a question of knowing the repertoire, knowing the song, or really developing the technique to adequately access those parts of your range. If you are greater than that off the pitch, you're really singing a different note entirely, more or less at that point. And solfege can help with this. Breaking down the melodies of the song that you're working on can help with that. You may, for a time, require a key change in order to practice the melody so that it's in a comfortable range, and then move it back up into the performance key. Check it again there. Wash, rinse, repeat if you're still developing your technique in the range that that particular song is in. As always, I hope this helps. I know it's a bit longer than a quick tip, but there you go. There are 1,001 reasons why we might be out of tune. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be singing with others or singing and playing in a Western tonal system of music where things are tuned to, roughly speaking, a 440, we have to figure out how to be in tune. And again, I hope this helps. My name's Jeff. Take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.